Red Hat OpenShift is the sponsor for our container platform coverage from OSCON in Austin, Texas. OpenShift reaches across open source communities to collaborate for healthy upstream development. The goal? Ensure the support for features and functionalities that end users require across the overall ecosystem. You can learn more at OpenShift.com. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack here at OSCON. We are talking right now about CNCF and Prometheus in particular. And why don't we just go around the horn and tell us who's in, so we can see who's here. Diane, introduce yourself.
Well, I'm the Director of Community Development for OpenShift at Red Hat and a member of the CNCF Marketing Committee, and happily working with both Prometheus and Kubernetes.
I'm Chris Anisczyk. I'm currently the Vice President of Developer Programs at the Linux Foundation, also currently serving as the Interim Executive Director for CNCF and OCI.
Hey guys, hey, Lee Calcote. I just recently pushed off from Seagate, and I'm out hunting for what's next, and I'm happy to join Alex and team at the New Stack.
So Prometheus, tell us a little bit about Prometheus. Tell us a bit about how it fits with CNCF. And maybe for, Chris, for folks out there, tell us a little bit about CNCF, what it is, and, and what you guys are trying to achieve. And I think that'll help explain, your adoption of Prometheus as a project.
Sure. CNCF is all about bringing the cloud-native computing, paradigm to kind of the masses. So there's been certain companies out there, like let's say Google, Facebook, Twitter, that kind of have learned to scale out their infrastructure in many interesting ways, building new technologies over time. The whole notion of how they do this is we came up with the term cloud-native. Essentially, it's defined via, essentially these companies are running containers, right? They're usually running services or microservices, what do you call them, containers, and they're dynamically scheduled across all their infrastructure. That's essentially how it's working. So any technology that kind of fits the notions of being, running in containers, being dynamically scheduled and, is microservice oriented is a technology that we consider for potential inclusion within the CNCF. And to start off, Kubernetes was our seed technology. It was the first one that was included in the foundation. The second one, which was Prometheus, which we just announced last week, which is great.
That about, I think, sums it up so far. So OpenShift, tell us about, OpenShift and its interest in, in the CNCF. I mean, you guys are very much, integrated with Kubernetes, and I'm curious about your, why, what your interest is in Prometheus.
Well, there's an interesting, since we're shifting from being a platform as a service, and the project formerly known as a platform as a service, to a container platform, we have tons of microservices that are now containerizing themselves and making themselves available for application developers to use and orchestrate on OpenShift, and which upstreams Kubernetes. So we have this relationship already with the CNCF around Kubernetes and the work that we're doing there. So we really want that to make sure that upstream project gets resourced and supported in a good, healthy way. And we think the CNCF is the right place for it to be done. Prometheus, on the other hand, is one of those services that it's great for large-scale monitoring. It's really, it had flown under the radar for a bit of time, and so the visibility that it's getting from the CNCF is really cool. And a good example of how under the radar it was is that 2 weeks ago I was giving an OpenShift Commons briefing with the Crunchy Data folks, Jeff McCormick, and he was talking about HA scaling of Postgres, which was totally cool, and that's all I wanted him to talk about. But what he'd done is create a great template for any data store, and he was sharing that best practice, and one of it was containerizing up all the tool chains. So like the day after the announcement, here's Jeff McCormick giving a demo of Prometheus and Grafana on another podcast, and it's just, and then the next day after that, good thing that Prometheus is a distinct name.
Yeah.
I went through all of the old mailing lists for Red Hat on the engineering and just started to see like the explosion of people, not just Prometheus, but Grafana as well, and the other tooling. So these tools are really an integral part of the cloud native experience and developers experience. So it's a great thing that they've come under the CNCF, and it's not like we're trying to build a Kubernetes stack or anything like that. It's about creating the tooling and the tool chains for cloud natives to be successful.
Yeah, I think it's more like harmonizing the technologies that kind of exist already out there, right? Prometheus, like Diane said, was kind of flying under the radar.
So what is Prometheus for people who may not know?
It's basically it's a monitoring and alerting toolkit, essentially. But under the covers, they have a time series database that lives under there. So it's essentially an open source monitoring and alerting toolkit, so you could monitor all sorts of different services.
Originally developed at SoundCloud.
They spun it off into kind of an independent GitHub organization. They had a diverse set of kind of committers and contributors to the project, but they were kind of looking to take it to the next level, right? Help with marketing, help find a neutral home, make sure that the IP was clean and all that good stuff. And foundations are a good, source to do this for them. And they were closely aligned anyway with Kubernetes to begin with, so it just completely made sense. And Prometheus is just one of these technologies that we're looking to bring under.
So Lee, what are your questions about it?
So just speaking of origins that you were just talking about, is that, I spent some time here this last week with sort of the core maintainers of that project, and came to understand that I think it was 3 of them had sort of prior relationships in their roles at Google in the site reliability engineering organization. And so
Prometheus is kind of inspired by Borgman, which is the kind of their internal monitoring tool for Borg, which is what Kubernetes was inspired from.
There's some common inspiration that looks like happening across these projects, so that makes sense as to why they sort of resonate together. And I also understand one of the maintainers, Fabian, has recently joined CoreOS, and having spoken with Brandon this week, I got the sense that there was a future there for Tectonic in terms of their need for monitoring.
Oh, absolutely.
And I guess the question being just, Diane, to what extent do you feel like from an OpenShift perspective there's this fit and kind of need for monitoring in there?
Well, I think when you're looking at OpenShift, which upstreams Kubernetes, and we work really closely with the Kubernetes from whatever tooling, and right now I think mostly some of the performance is using Heapster, and there's a Cube dashboard. There's lots of ways to monitor Kubernetes clusters or things that are based on that. But I think coming to a harmonized way of doing that, not to say that any of those other ways are not good, is part of what we're looking with the cross-community collaboration that we're doing now. And from an OpenShift perspective, we're really trying to work with all of the different approaches. But I think that Prometheus has got some really good aspects to it, and we've got lots of other service providers besides Crunchy Data that are looking at it to use it and incorporate it. So I think it's a natural fit.
The language you use, Harmony, and it's
harmonize is a very interesting term.
Yeah, Harmony, it is a very interesting term, and I'm curious.
It's a nice way of saying interoperable.
Yeah, it's like, but I'm curious, like, what are these different platforms that make them not harmonious? So when you if it was like, if there was an akin to some music, what would you be hearing?
Well, in order to harmonize, I think you first have to have some kind of governance structure in place or some mechanism in order to do that, right? Because a lot of these projects that have been built by SoundCloud, Netflix, or so on are all living in independent homes, who knows where, on GitHub with their own kind of technical, governance, right? By moving it into something with the CNCF, we have a structure in place where we kind of have a quote-unquote technical Supreme Court that is there to, that's been independently independently elected to basically harmonize, these technologies using their experience. And these are the right people to do it. You have like Brian Grant, like main author of Kubernetes, Solomon Hykes from Docker, Ben Henman from Mesosphere, Alexis Richards from WeFork. So you have these right people that are split across industry that have been building, cloud native and container native technologies for a while, that are the right folks to help push these projects in a certain direction. So, and harmonize is an interesting word, because I don't think you could harmonize projects without there being some level of competition. So CNCF was always thought of being a kind of a neutral cloud native commons to allow for potentially competing projects to work together and harmonize over time, because I think you need to have some level of competition to harmonize.
So Chris, I think you threw in a keyword there as well in terms of harmony, and it was commons, which I think is probably a familiar term for Diane.
Yes,
Diane, how does harmony fit into OpenShift?
Well, I think of it, and harmony is a great word, and I don't sing, so I'm not going to sing it.
I'm just feeling like we need to break out in song.
I know, I'm not going to be that woman, I'm not going to do that for you.
You stack need a new jingle or something?
Yeah, really.
Exactly.
I'm not doing that for you. But I think one of the things is there's so much noise, and there's so many conversations going, whether it's across all of the upstream projects or it's up and down the stack, from the users to the operators to the hosts to the sysadmins, the folks that are contributing to the different projects, that there has to be a way to get that conversation to be productive, and the feedback loops to get back to the folks who are working on the different pieces, and people to understand the different use cases across it. And this is, I think, what I've been promoting is a new open source community model, to have these peer-to-peer, barrier-free conversations and facilitating those. And so I think that's, anytime you can drop the commons bomb in a conversation, it's really about promoting that conversation and making sure that there's a free flow of information and back and forth.
So the commons bomb, when you drop that, does that just create this instant harmony everywhere?
A commons bomb, it's like boom, yeah.
There it is. There's harmony.
Well, it's like if we go, and I always riff on the Cathedral and Bazaar, but it was a wonderful book, and it was really seminal to my coming out into the open source world. But I think that metaphor of Cathedral and Bazaar is kind of broken, and open source, that was 1999. Prince is dead. We've moved on. I miss Prince a lot. He's one of my heroes. But I think we need a new metaphor for the way that we communicate and with the way that we facilitate the conversations. And the CNCF is doing a pretty good job of it. I think it's a great place for project stuff. I think the next barrier is cross-community. How do we get the different upstream projects talking to each other, not just managing individual projects?
But I have a question though. So you chose Prometheus, right? But there's so many, you didn't choose it, but it's a project, right? So there's so many other monitoring tools out there, right? So how does Prometheus kind of rank with all those others, and how does it fit,
say how it ranks. So the way projects are accepted within CNCF, essentially, like I mentioned, we have this technical Supreme Court of these wonderful experts, right? And it's kind of a push/pull model, right? Sometimes projects come to the TOC, the Supreme Court, or sometimes the TOC reaches out to projects and tries to get them to come on board. With Prometheus, it's a combination of both. And they have a process, they had a meeting, they voted, and they accepted. There's nothing to prevent other, monitoring solutions and projects to come along, but, they were the first ones that they, reached out to based on their technical wisdom, and working in this space.
A thought to share on that, I think too. Just that's a fantastic question. I think that there's other tooling out there, like Sysdig, for example, is one that is still
that's super popular. And
sounded like part of that decisioning might have been around just how much of the good bits, so to speak, were open source versus for Sysdig Cloud. And but kind of going back earlier to, I think, one of Alex's questions about just, the adoption of Prometheus, and Diane, you were talking about just the notion that on the week that it was announced, you were seeing it containerized already.
It was so cool. I really, truly had no idea that he was going to talk about it. But I just think and I think you touched on a key thing about the open source nature of it. The project is fully open source. There's no hidden corporate bits that I know of or I've seen. And what I fully expect is a lot of the other monitoring tools to take advantage of that, to pull in and fork the code and use it into their interfaces. You know, just like so many people are using Grafana and other projects that are out there. I fully expect that the work that gets done on Prometheus will show up and surface in other places.
And the foundation is basically doing everything in its power to kind of up-level the project. You know, we're going to do a Prometheus Day towards the end of this year with our Cloud Native and KubeCon Day. So anything to kind of help promote and bring that project to a wider audience, especially within the existing CNCF membership, especially to companies that are already end users of cloud native technology, is going to be like a huge boon for the project.
This is a big year for Cloud Native Computing Foundation, isn't it? I mean, you guys are, we're coming into OSCON now, we're coming into DockerCon, there's the ContainerCon coming up, and then KubeCon in the fall, and you guys are going to be pretty much having a presence everywhere.
It's literally been about a year since we announced the intent to form the foundation, because it was last year at OSCON that it was essentially announced that we're doing this. It took us about 6 months of kind of dealing with all all the boring legal stuff that you have to do to bootstrap a foundation, charter, bylaws, all that good stuff. And so now we're kind of getting our groove, making some good hires. We're looking to expand the foundation staff and all that good stuff.
So tell us what you're going to do with Prometheus. So, give us some sense of where we're going with it.
In terms of
what is it? Tell us about the plan. I mean, help us kind of understand the process here, right? So, it was adopted as a project, right? So that's step one.
So there's a few things we're doing. First, the TOC is working with Prometheus to kind of help establish some fair governance rules in terms of how to, add new committers to the project. How should that be done, right? Within CNCF, it's done in a way where each project kind of gets to define how they want to do it with input from the TOC, and so they're trying to outlay some best practices for them so they can make sure that, if there's a company or individual doing a lot of contributions to the project, there could be some fair process to get them elected as, a full-time committer to the project. From like a marketing point of view, we're helping them by, there's a very small conference called PromCon that just the developers are doing out in Berlin.
80 attendees too.
Yeah, it's gonna be a small, very developer focused PromCon. It's I wouldn't choose a name, but that's a name that they
catchy.
that they chose.
Wearing prom dresses. It's gonna be awesome.
Exactly.
That's dudes in prom dresses.
That is an event to attend.
Yeah, so it's gonna be a very small, developer focused event hosted in Google's offices in Berlin.
When is that?
August. It's in late August. I need to double check, but it's late August.
Right before ContainerCon.
Yeah, I think it's maybe right after or right before. But it's very small focus, mostly for the developer community. Kind of get together for the first time, essentially, which is fun because a lot of these projects have been disparate and they haven't even had a ability to kind of get together under a neutral umbrella. Another thing that we're doing is we're doing the Prometheus Day, like I mentioned before, and kind of bringing that event, co-locating it with KubeCon and Cloud Native Con, and kind of bringing together all these folks under one house.
We along those lines, we've invited Brian Brazil here to actually host. We're hosting him at a local Austin meetup as well. He's going to come kind of make the U.S. tour, I think, after PromCon.
Well, there'll also be on August 25th, Cloud Native Day in Toronto, in association with ContainerCon and LinuxCon. I know we're going to do the day before KubeCon an OpenShift Commons gathering in Seattle as well to help promote some of the work that we're doing across the different communities. So there's a lot of places where cloud natives are going to be gathering soon.
Absolutely.
Alex brought up, I want to kind of jump us back, rewind for a minute, because Alex brought up this question that I'd given some consideration to here recently as well, and I'd love to get Diane's and Chris's perspective just on kind of that monitoring space around time series metrics collection, which is really the focus of Prometheus, and having taken a look myself at SaaS offering Librato from SolarWinds, I noticed a couple of distinctions, and maybe you guys can expound on this for me. But it's the notion that a SaaS offering like Librato is one, convenient because it's SaaS. Not that Prometheus itself isn't easy to install. I played with it in about 5 minutes myself. But this, I think, where I wanted to expand on was this push model of metrics being sent to a SaaS offering like Librato versus, I think that there's some, or I know that there's some perspectives by the Prometheus maintainers around this pull model, this polling model of metrics collection. I think they refer to it as scraping. And so I didn't know if within your realms that this had become a conversation point for you guys, or even a point of contention. I know there's some...
Not really. I think it's just really depends on whether you have the historical data hosted that you can do. We just did a whole bunch of work with the Apache Spark toolkit. I was just at ApacheCon a couple weeks ago, and I don't know if you've heard Project Dacon is the code word. Some came out of Radish. Don't get me running on it, but it's using Apache Spark, and they're using it against all of the historical log files for OpenShift and doing all the analysis to do performance configuration recommendations. So we have that data. So for us, it's like we're not pushing it to a SaaS offering. We're running Apache Spark toolkits and tool chains against it. So it depends on where you are in where the data is.
Exactly, and also, clearly depends on how you structure your business. If you're basically, taking a SaaS-based business, of course you want people to push data to you so you could charge for it, and but I envision someone potentially standing up and doing the same thing for Prometheus in the future. The whole point of CNCF is to provide a very unopinionated set of technologies, a commons that people could choose from and offer opinionated solutions on. CoreOS has the whole tectonic distro, right? That's an opinionated instance of CNCF technology.
Yeah.
And I envision the same thing happen with Prometheus. You'll have companies and members take things a la carte and build.
I could see someone with a containerized version of Prometheus launching a service on OpenShift Online and just say, put a beautiful UI on it and make sure that it's super secure and,
But why did you start with monitoring?
It's whoever shows up first. There's certain technologies and groups.
They showed up first.
Not they showed up first, but they were early in the conversations. So
it doesn't matter. So there's really no priority about. It could be it could be a load balancer next. It could be
potentially. It's not necessarily. The TOC is independent. For me running the governing board, it's we can't tell the TOC what to do, right? They go out and operate.
But did the organizers come to you, or did you go to them?
It was a mix of both. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When the TOC started, they came up kind of with a list of technologies that were interesting in the cloud native space, and then folks that they wanted to talk to and invite, because they essentially host a open weekly meeting, right? And the way they've been working is they usually try to invite projects that they think are interesting, maybe do a small presentation, and then have further conversation to see whether it makes sense to turn that into a proposal or not.
So there's no schedule necessarily for what projects will come on board.
No, it's the same way. It's just it's similar to the Apache Foundation. Who knows what will be proposed next week?
Are there any coming up this summer that we'll see?
I can't say I can't say in concretely anything, but previously we've discussed things. If you look at the notes within the TOC, we've discussed etcd, CNI, gRPC. There's
gRPC is interesting.
So there's just the notes are freely open and available. The meetings are meant to be public and transparent for everyone to attend and listen in on.
So speaking of public meetings and notes, it sounds like at DockerCon there'll be will it be an open forum for people to kind of get to know the CNCF and the TOC? Or
we haven't officially planned anything
not at DockerCon. Probably at the CNCF Day in Toronto on August 25th will be pretty. Come get to know your CNCF folks and people who are playing in the ecosystem, and that's probably the first point of contact for a lot of people with real CNCF players.
Absolutely, and it's funny because the TOC itself hasn't had a full-blown face-to-face meeting yet, which is interesting. So that'll be probably the first avenue where they're all.
That'll be harmonious.
Yeah, it'll be definitely harmonious.
As long as there's good craft beer, I'm sure everybody will be happy.
Absolutely. So. But it's it's still early days for the foundation. We're growing fast, and part of the challenge is one of these days I'm gonna have to write a book on like the forming of a foundation. But like there's a lot of things you have to bootstrap to kind of get going and lay down.
I mean, we're looking at kind of new projects to do ourselves, and and it seems like that there's just so much to cover. I mean, for instance, like application. We were like, we're talking about what are the different approaches to application deployment, right?
Application definition.
Application definition.
Big issue.
So, I'll be curious to see how you guys, course through this, because that's going to really, I think, be the critical factor here.
So you'll see in the CNCF charter, there's a Schedule A, which is like a rough architecture diagram of kind of how we envision cloud native and some of the bits that the CNCF or projects and services that we're interested to accept in the foundation, that will be eventually expanded and delineated a little bit further and more specific in terms of what we're looking for. So
what's in that initial sketch offhand?
It's just like simple, like distributed system. It's a very simple architecture diagram of things we consider part of.
It's like CNCF bingo kind of thing.
It's in some way, but we don't specifically name technologies outside of we don't concern ourselves with infrastructure provisioning. Like we don't care how you lay down your machines. If you use if it's on bare metal with Chef, Puppet, Ansible, or you're running on OpenStack, we don't care. But that's not technology we're interested in. We're interested in running on top of said things. So.
Okay.
So, Chris, speaking of just the activities there, I understand that folks that do contribute to foundations like this, they also have day jobs, and they, I guess, your thoughts on sort of assisting, folks kind of in your role, either I don't know if you call it, cat herding, or is it corralling, or is it, but it from what I could tell with the mailing list, it looks like folks are pretty engaged. The pace is fairly brisk, and Diane, I know you're involved as well, but just from other open source initiatives or foundations that you guys have been involved in, how would you, compare and contrast kind of?
It's a fascinating question. I think in the beginning there's always a bootstrapping phase where it takes a while to kind of, establish a marketing committee, establish subcommittees, learn and meet people who are working in these foundations. So I think we're kind of getting past that bootstrapping phase, and the foundation's getting to a point where, we're hiring staff, right? Right now it's essentially, me and my time is split amongst things. So we're just getting in that phase. I think one way to think about this is OpenStack Summit was here recently, like a week or two ago, and Jonathan Bryce, I think, went up on the stage and it's like, 6 years ago, we hosted our first OpenStack Summit, and there was 70 of us in one room, right? 6 years later, we're 7,000 something, right? So I think we're still in that first year phase, but
subcommittees on the horizon, do you think, or?
So we're right now investing a lot of my time bootstrapping the end user community. So there's a lot of folks like Goldman Sachs, AT&T, eBay, and so on that are large consumers of cloud native technology, but not necessarily big time contributors. So we're spinning up a essentially committee and technical advisory board for end users, and so a lot of my time and investment is going into getting that up and operational.
I think in comparison to other foundations, what you might see is the waning of the mailing lists, from other foundations, and that as the new technologies evolve, this new CNCF is kind of a landing place for people who are interested in the new technologies, and maybe some of the older ones are kind of. I think that's what I'm seeing a little bit, is that they're just having a little more time getting people doing more than just maintaining the code base. Yeah. So coming from Python and Perl and languages from old days in ActiveSafe, you start seeing that it's almost like a drift.
Yeah. Part of the challenge we face is also trying to provide modern infrastructure for our projects, right? We have a Slack, we're looking at, we have this community data center that's been donated by, Intel and SuperNAP that we're trying to, get CNCF projects to take advantage of for performance testing and integration testing and all that stuff. So there's all these things that we're lucky where we don't have much legacy, so we're able to kind of use new stuff, which is great. So
what's been the uptick with that set of resources, the computing resources?
The data center, so we're still basically, there's a handful of members that have actually deployed, things like Joyance out there deploying Triton, Mesosphere for works are doing, Mesa stuff. We're getting to the point where we're trying to open up a fair process for projects to submit, hey, I need, 5 machines or something like that. So we're getting to that point where we're opening that.
That's interesting. What I think would be
software.
Yeah.
Running in Harmony too. The thing that'll be really interesting is once those computing resources get used up, there'll need to be some way of sharing, and so one of those platforms maybe needs to run the other platforms, and so that would be.
We will dog food. Like it's all about dog. In the beginning, you have to bootstrap. Eventually, we'll dog food. Like I would like Prometheus running to monitor actually, the state of the.
You guys are just gonna spend all your time geeking out on this rack.
We're gonna have fun. We're gonna have fun. It's one of the wonderful things about having resources donated to a project or making projects resources available. We do it at OpenShift all the time for nonprofits and startups, and all kinds of projects are hosted on there, and it's a wonderful thing to be able to help facilitate that.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you guys, thanks so much for taking some time to talk and learning more about Prometheus and CNCF and and what's happening with OpenShift. And look forward to keeping in touch. There's lots to come.
There'll be more.
There'll be more harmonization.
More. Yeah, we'll be singing.
Rock and roll.
Okay. All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Red Hat OpenShift is the sponsor for our container platform coverage from OSCON in Austin, Texas. OpenShift reaches across open source communities to collaborate for healthy upstream development. The goal? Ensure the support for features and functionalities that end users require across the overall ecosystem. You can learn more at OpenShift.com.